Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Thursday, April 18th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And joining us from Tel Aviv, tablet editor-at-large, co-host of the Unorthodox podcast, and author most recently of How the Talmud Could Change Your Life, commentary contributor Liel Leibovitz. Hi, Liel.
Shalom, John. Shalom, Abe. Shalom, Seth.
So, Liel, we are going to have to turn to you to give us your report on the ground from Tel Aviv on everything that every Israeli is thinking on every matter, and do it with the authority that only comes from having flown in on a plane and seen your family. But of course, we all do that. It's the tradition to say, Liel, you're there. Tell us the feeling, the facts on the ground.
My pleasure. And as it happens, all Israelis are united. They all agree. So this will be an easy and quick conversation. We'll get to it soon.
Okay, that's yes, we will get to that in a second. Before we do, though, Seth and I spent the day yesterday watching the hearing before Congress, in which the two trustees, the president of Columbia University and the head of Columbia University's Anti-Semitism Task Force, testified on anti-Semitism at Columbia. And while it was not the life-altering experience of the first hearing in December, which of course ended the presidencies of the head of Harvard and the head of Penn, with the head of MIT hanging on by a thread for reasons that elude me. There was a lot of interesting stuff that went on. In particular, the fact that Minouche Safik, the president of Columbia, at first said there had been no anti-Jewish protests at Columbia, and then said no, there had, and then said no, there hadn't, and then said yes, there have. So it was interesting to watch her. She was extraordinarily well prepared, well briefed. But I think my favorite moment, and that I think we need to talk about, involves something that Liel wrote about earlier this week for City Journal. I want to talk about the piece that he wrote for commentary, but here I am. I'm so broad-minded that I'm referencing a different publication other than our own to begin, which is about the Columbia's Middle Eastern Studies Department, a notorious hotbed of anti-Israel opinion dating back to the mid-'70s, when its most notable figure, or its sort of ancillary most notable figure, was Edward Said, who was actually an English professor at Columbia, but then sort of became the poobah of what was then, I think, called Oriental Studies at Columbia, and over the course of the last 25 years has employed a series of unmentionables, from Rashid Khalidi, who was a spokesman for the PLO in Lebanon in 1982 before becoming an American academic and a very close friend of Barack Obama's, at whose dinner, leaving UCLA to go to Columbia as a professor, Barack Obama famously gave a toast that the LA Times in 2008 got a hold of. The toast that he had given, apparently maybe saying things that would have been harmful to the Obama campaign, and the LA Times, what's the term that David Picker is alleged to have catch and kill? They caught and killed the Obama toast to Rashid Khalidi, apparently his closest friend, according to some. And then, of course, the notorious Joseph Mossad, subject of a tenure battle in the early 2000s, somebody who has said such interesting things as there are no homosexuals in Iran because, of course, the Quran forbids it, and therefore there are no homosexuals in Iran, which may be true since homosexuals are killed in Iran whenever they are discovered. And many other things, including stuff that was said after October 7th. Joseph Mossad became a subject of conversation, as was a visiting professor named Muhammad Abdu. And Joseph and Minouche Safik said very sternly that Joseph Mossad, who celebrated Hamas's violent slaughter on October 7th, had been spoken to. He had been spoken to, and a conversation had been had. And Elise Stefanik, congressman from New York, said, according to your website, he is the head of the appointments committee in the Middle Eastern Studies Department. Is he still head of that committee? Does he still choose X, Y, and Z? And she said no. And then Elise Stefanik said, well, you say no, but he's still on your website, lady. And you said that Mr. Abdo will no longer ever teach at Columbia, but you also said he's grading papers. So what is he doing grading students' papers? You should look up this guy and listen to the two pieces of tape that I think Visegrad 24 got of him speaking at Columbia, to hear the horror of this guy who is a transactional, queer, settler, anti-colonialist, multicultural
anarchist
bullshit artist, and therefore, of course, in hot demand at all Ivy League universities. So, Liel, let me just, so this is my quick summary, is that they've been spoken to, and they're very concerned about anti-Semitism, but there were no anti-Jewish protests, except there were, but there weren't. There were. And meanwhile, at Columbia yesterday, as they were talking, a Gaza encampment was set up on the center of the Columbia campus, which is sort of like a shanty town or a Hooverville or Zuccotti Park during Occupy Wall Street, and they intend never to take it down. So
from the river to the sweet greens, Palestine shall be free.
And of course, the river is actually quite close to Columbia. The sea a little further away. Yes, from the river to the Spoiten-Duyvil, Palestine shall be free. If I can just ask then, Liel, I don't think there are going to be any consequences from what happened yesterday with Minouche Safik, because she didn't step on a landmine, and now it's sort of like, well, if you don't step on a landmine, you've survived and won the battle. Sort of like Israel and Iran, the missiles didn't get through, therefore Minouche Safik should take the win.
Honestly, John, I'm surprised you would even ask this question. The president said very clearly, Professor Abdo is no longer a teacher at Columbia. He no longer teaches. He merely instructs, orates, opines, and occasionally talks to students. And Professor Mossad was spoken to, which, Seth has a few kids. He could tell you the great meaning of, I talked to the child, and he said he would never, ever do this again. Look, this is comical, and I sort of have a PhD in Columbia shenanigans because I got it wonderfully, catastrophically, entirely, and totally wrong. I was at this university as a young and innocent lad, and that was around the time, I think it's around 2007, in which Barry Weiss and a bunch of other students came and made all these allegations that in retrospect are so clear and obvious. And yet here I was, all enamored and starstruck by the fact that someone let, unkempt, unwashed me into the sort of like higher echelons of American higher education. And so I basically kind of asked these people, hey, is this true? And of course, they said, no, we're just kind of peaceful, fair-minded interlocutors who want to really just study uninterrupted by ideologues. And so I kind of believed them. I fell for it once. And when it became clear to me how stupid I was, I promised to never, ever do it again. Now, here's the amazing thing about Columbia, and this is sort of the point of the piece that I was writing for City Journal. The point is that Columbia actually has not only the means, but a rich history of taking actually very clear, concrete measures that actually can transform departments. There is a somewhat obscure, but not entirely unheard of academic measure called academic receivership, which is when a university believes that a certain department has gotten unruly, like, say, because of an undue number of Hamas supporter, anarchist, pro-ISIS maniacs who want to burn America down and seem to have a real impact on life on campus that leads to violence against about 15% of the students. The university could come and say, look, we're appointing a different head to the department. We are going to have a sort of, blood transfusion, if you will, and we're going to basically kind of consult and manage this department back into health. Columbia did this to the anthropology department twice in the 90s. It did it to the English department in the early 2000s, I believe. All these times it was successful. Columbia right now could say, hey, look, we're taking over the Middle East Studies department. We're letting a few people go. We're bringing a few new people in. And yet, miraculously, wonderfully, they took the high road of bullshit and did absolutely nothing.
I think one of our favorite moments in the hearing, Seth's and mine, came when a congressman from Florida, I think his name is, well, it's not Burgess Owens. I can't remember his name. He had a great beard. I should try to look this up. But he went on a tear, and he said, so what you're saying is that you've put Joseph Mossad on double secret probation, which of course is what Dean Wormer in Animal House says he has the power to do to the Delta House, put them on double secret probation. Now, Liel, you're actually saying that Minouche Safik and the Columbia trustees could put the Middle Eastern Studies Department on double secret probation and take the department into receivership. I assume the term meaning that certain types of academic freedoms can be curtailed to clean up the department, like tenure can be overruled. Minouche Safik said there are, of course, traditions at Columbia and others where a gross behavior, the professional misconduct, can allow the revocation of tenure. So they could do it. They choose not to.
With great academic freedom, as Spider-Man's uncle once said, comes great academic responsibility. And the responsibility is to make sure that these people actually teach something valuable and viable, and not, as in the case of Joseph Mossad, to teach that Zionism gets its name not from Zion in Hebrew, but from Zion, or penis, because it's a patriarchal, phallocentric movement, which the man has said in class on several occasions. Now, the double secret probation option is funny, not only because Columbia currently really has the power to do so. It could, again, evoke academic receivership, which it has done at least 3 or 4 times that I know of in the last, 20 years. But it's actually an apt metaphor, John, because Joseph Mossad himself was appointed tenured professor due to some kind of very shady double secret probation process. The man was denied tenure the first time around. You don't have to be a dean, to know, or a rector of a university to know that if you deny tenure, usually what happens is someone comes and says, so we're going to need the office back by July 1st. Please leave. It's been nice knowing you. Joseph Mossad got a contract extension, then a super secret second committee, so secret that when the trustees of the university said, we would like to know why there's a second committee, and Judith Miller reported at the time, widely on this, we would like to know why there's another committee and who's on it. The university said, sorry, we can't tell you this. The head of the first tenure committee said, I can't be part of this, kangaroo process, quit. And miraculously, Joseph Mossad's new tenure was announced. Or rather, John, it wasn't announced. It was actually kept secret. The university kept the fact that he got tenure secret from students, other faculty members, and its trustees. So yes, super double secret. That's exactly what we're talking about here.
Okay, so by the way, I should mention that the double secret probation congressman is Aaron Bean of Florida, who has a beard almost as excellent as Seth's beard. And so we salute him, not only for actually a pretty remarkable kind of rant, but also for his pop culture savvy, something not entirely known to many Republicans from Florida. So that is a tribute to him. I also would like to shout out Kevin Kiley, congressman from, I believe, Missouri, who was really spectacularly good in surfacing California, surfacing the inherent contradictions in what Safik, Claire Shipman, David Greenwood were all saying. So that I think in the end, though, the Columbia, the rule now is that what you want to do is go before Congress, and rather than try to defend your actions by saying it all depends on the context, say I'm Mr. Magoo, I'm Mr. Bean, not to use Bean again. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is really hard. It's really hard to be a university president, and I've only been doing it for 9 months, and this is very complicated. And to be fair, it's complicated. There is academic freedom. There is, which is why you want to be careful with whom you grant tenure, because they are therefore have a kind of lifetime permission to go absolutely, hog wild under your auspices. But there is academic freedom. There are issues of freedom of speech. And yet there is also a doctrine that has been promulgated over the last 20 years that safety is the primary concern of the administration of a university, and everybody's safety is apparently guaranteed except the safety of Jews.
She even asked, it was Johanna Hayes, a Democrat from Connecticut, who was talking to her about two different things. One was the anti-Semitism, and one was, do you need more money from Congress? But she actually had a good line of questioning. But on the money situation, Manoush Shafik said, yeah, that would be helpful. And any suggestions you have would be helpful. I think she said lists. There was a list and any lists, any suggestions, any whatever would be helpful. She was desperately looking for somebody else to set the rules, and she made that very clear. And I think that was part of the whole. There was a kind of strange but humorous scene where one of the Republican congressmen asked her why student publications spell the word folks Folx, and she said, I don't know, because they can't spell, because they don't know how to spell. And it was like, well, you know why they're doing it, and you know that they can spell because it's Columbia University. But the larger point was that she didn't want to get up there and defend the kind of ridiculousness that students have managed to make almost obligatory, even in non-school funded publications or non-school funded events and stuff like that. She was looking for help me control these animals.
Yeah,
I think, I didn't see the entire hearing, but I saw clips. And what strikes me is that the idea is to keep the ideological academic jargon to a minimum. Keep that out of the public eye, because when normal non-academics hear that stuff, they go, oh, this is a loony bin. Now I see. Right. And that's what happened the first time round, in part.
What they had learned was being arrogant and being argumentative and being caustic would be unbelievably destructive to them. So they were obsequious, Shafik and company. I mean, they were the opposite of what Claudine Gay was. They were, thank you for highlighting this important issue. Thank you for telling me that there have been protests at Columbia for 9 months about which I have done absolutely nothing. I'm really going to have to get right on that. Thank you. This is
why you send the university president out with two chairs of the trustees.
Yes, exactly. And they get to do it too. There is nothing they hate more than anti-Semitism, except defending Jews against anti-Semitism, which is not that predicate. They did not establish the second part of that sentence, but boy, they wanted you to know that it was so terrible. And it was so terrible that even David Shizer, the Columbia Law School professor and one-time commentary contributor, a longtime acquaintance of mine, who was the head of the anti-Semitism task force, asked a very peculiar question. He was asked to define, because there was a student anthropology department document, a glossary that was put out by students in the anthropology department of terms that students would have to face. And one of them was, yes, Ashkenormativity. And David Shizer said, that's appalling. How that is shockingly anti-Semitic. Actually, everything. Yeah, we need to define it, but I just want to.
Snagdim would use the term Ashkenormativity.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but there are many things that you could say about Ashkenormativity, and I would love to spend 2 hours making fun of the concept of Ashkenormativity, but it isn't actually anti-Semitic. It is an intra-Jewish, intra-tribal term in which leftists who are trying to align themselves with Sephardic or Mizrahi Jews complain that the Jewish community in the world skews toward Ashkenazic European Jews and Yiddish and things like that, and they are therefore looked on as the other, and this needs to stop. Translated into academic jargon, Ashkenormativity, which, as I say, is a preposterous concept, except of everything that happened at the hearing yesterday. It is everything worth making fun of and condemning, but it's not anti-Semitic. But the outrage to hear that somebody would put out a document that used the word Ashkenormativity, that I'm telling you, they were very concerned. Someone is going to be spoken to.
Those snags. I think, though, hearing this discussion, I think what we've all learned is clearly the way to solve anti-Semitism is with more education, right? Isn't that what the president
there are 51 courses. First of all, she kept saying there are 51 courses in, I don't even know what. It's like, yeah, okay, can I see the syllabi? Because I understand there are 51 courses. What are being taught? Is Herzl's The Jewish State being taught in those courses? Is Washington's letter to the congregation in Newport being taught in those courses? Or is it all, maybe there was settler colonialism, or maybe there wasn't. We don't know what are in those courses. The notion that there are 51 courses and therefore Columbia is really combating anti-Semitism, really, in an excellent way.
That was Kathy Manning's point, right? She was a former head of the Jewish Federations and
Congress,
the Congresswoman Kathy Manning.
Yes,
and that was kind of her point in both hearings, right? I think she made a very similar point in the last hearing, which was she read a course description to Claudine Gay, the former president of Harvard, who was ousted over her performance in those hearings. Other stuff. And she read a course description to her, and she said, this course description describes Jews as interlopers and invaders, but don't you, Claudine Gay, the history of Jews, the connection between the people of Israel and the land of Israel, right? The connection between the people of Judea and Judea. Like, this isn't that complicated, right? That Jews have been around a while. And so it put her in this awkward situation where what Manning was trying to highlight was, you say the right things here, but your professors in your classes, and some of them are obligatory classes because they get, not because they're prerequisites, but because they get the DEI stamp. Some of these courses get a DEI stamp, and they become, therefore, obligatory in certain ways. And she's saying, you're teaching all these anti-Semitic things that you are saying up here you don't agree with. So, yeah, I mean, I think the course thing is the key. We had a discussion last time about course review and stuff like that, but she was like, well, why don't we just add more? And it was like, no, more cowbell is not what's going to do it here. Your institution has a huge anti-Semitism problem. So don't just double whatever you're already doing. My God, you obviously have to make changes.
I think what we've learned here, apropos changes, I think what we've learned from the previous hearing and yesterday's hearing is that there's really no problem with American higher education that a few rounds of artillery would not solve.
I like that joke. I enjoy it.
Sure, a
I
joke.
like a good savage joke. Yeah. But I want to go back to the point you were making fun of about, and say, about how more education, which is what Manoush Safik said. We need more education. So anti-Semitism is not cured by education. In fact, the term anti-Semitism is a product of 19th century German academic Jew hatred on the part of a leading German academic whose name, if I'm not going to totally mangle this, was von Treitschke, who devised the idea of the Semitic peoples and basically said that they needed to be quashed, and therefore anti-Semitism was a legitimate approach. But he broadened it. He meant that Semites were not just Jews, but
also the idea that the problem with Jews is not their religion; it's what they are.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And so, anti-Semitism as an ideology is an educated person's ideology. Jew hatred is eternal. And the idea that you want to destroy the Jews and stuff like that is eternal. But literally, the term anti-Semitism was a term coined in defense of methods and measures to implement Jew hatred as systematic policy. So, the most educated person of the 20th century, and someone who many people, not I, but many people believe was the greatest thinker of the 20th century, Martin Heidegger, was, of course, not only the foremost academic of his time, but a Nazi and somebody who slavered for and worshipped Nazi bloodlust. So don't hand me education is the solution to anti-Semitism. The solution to anti-Semitism tends to be common sense. It's not like the ordinary person in America is anti-Semitic. But apparently now increasing numbers of educated people are being told that anti-Semitism, it's okay to hate the Jewish nation. It's okay to hate the Jewish homeland. It's okay to hate and attack people who defend them. So I don't want to go like too crazy about this, but thanks very much to Manoush Safik for her defense of education. All of us. This is why, Liel, you want to take a machine gun to the. The salvation of this country lies in the people who are increasingly running universities having as little power as possible.
I mean, in my article in the current issue, I mentioned that, in 1922, the then Harvard president A. Lawrence Lowell was trying to avoid raising the anti-Semitism. He was trying to avoid being seen as anti-Semitic, and he went on and because of the quotas, they had to start getting recruiting students from other parts of the country. Read, not New York, and not Massachusetts, and not places where they were Jews. This was like a geographic quota. A way to get around the Jewish quota was to say, all right, let's go to Arizona and get the smart kids from Arizona, whatever it was. And so he went out there. This was a way to avoid Jewish quotas. And he was approached by donors and alumni who said, how do you plan to, quote, leave our university free of this plague? End quote. And the point that the reason it was phrased that way was because Columbia had been seen as already succumbed to the plague. And some of these other colleges, like, what are you going to do to protect Harvard from what happened to Columbia and these other schools?
Columbia for years had and we talked about this in a podcast that we had at Tablet Magazine, for years had a sort of junior college in Brooklyn to which it sent all of its Jews to keep them outside of the campus. But Seth, I think you make a lot of amazing points in your piece, which I thought was absolutely stunning. But one that really resonated with me is that we have now progressed from people problem to system problem. So it was one thing to have someone like Lowell coming up with these shenanigans and pushing against them, and then that person leaves and some reckoning and learning happens, and the student body at Columbia once again flourishes and hits that 20, 25, 30% mark. But I think that the point that you were making that was so great is that these institutions got smarter and they literally institutionalized the Jew hatred to an extent that it is very hard to imagine now, and this is why I made the quote unquote joke about having to raise every single university to the ground. It is very hard right now to imagine a pendulum swing, some kind of shift that would redeem what we're seeing here, because they really spent 30 years building the system around Jew hatred.
Right. So Seth's article is called "The Evil Campaign to Remove Jews from the Public Square," and the Academy is just one element here. But the central point that you're making, Seth, and that you alluded to before, is that Lowell and others kept the quotas on the QT. They did not walk around saying only 15% of this university will have, only 15% of the student body will be Jewish. They didn't say it. Law firms and other institutions in America that had systematic bars to entry for Jews did not say they had systematic bars for entry to Jews. Country clubs and other places that described themselves as restricted did not say that they were restricted because they were restricted only from Jewish membership. They were restricted from all kinds of membership. They just wouldn't tell you who. Obviously, Black people and others of extremely recent ethnic origin were probably part of the restrictions as well. What's different now is that the attack on Jews is open. The attack on Jews is open. It is people saying your homeland is evil. Your defense of your homeland is evil. And if you take a picture of me while I protest you, I can punch you. And no one is going to discipline me because I live in a municipality and in a state and in a territory where misdemeanors are not prosecuted. So I got a free shot at you. And these pusillanimous university administrators who would shut us down if that were easy for them are going to be blocked from doing so by other administrators. This is Liel's point, who have been populating every sphere of university life outside the classroom as pretty much putative lifetime employees, with the ideology that is being promulgated against Jews in the streets, in the hallways, at Cooper Union when people are running to try to get Jews inside the library and all of that. And this is now parallel. You say, okay, Jews are very clever. So Jews can be very clever. So there were barriers to entry all over the place. So what did they do? They founded Jewish law firms. And you know what? Over 70 years, the Jewish law firms got more successful than the white Jew law firms that kind of drove them out of business, though it took 70 years. Like Fried Frank, which is a firm that actually one of the Columbia trustees was the chairman of, various others, very successful firms. And that, Jews found workarounds to make their life in America. But now, increasingly, if you need elite accreditation to make your way, and things are systematically going against your ability to be an open Jew in elite circumstances, not to say if you could walk around Borough Park with a kippah on your head and be sure that you're not going to be punched in the back of the head by somebody. It's a different thing. And in some ways it's way more unnerving.
Yeah. Can I just say
that? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
As part of this idea that it's out in the open now, one thing that I think is different is that, so anti-Zionists used to be defensive about the accusation that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, right? They said, no. Every time you criticize Israel, you'll get accused of anti-Semitism, and that's not the same thing. It's as if now, by the examples that Seth brings up in his piece, by wrecking Jewish restaurants, by all the stuff you see in the news, by going to Jewish professors' houses and, invading their property and not leaving. And it's as if they're saying, no, you don't get it. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. That's what we're saying.
We've worked very hard. We've worked very hard to establish this, this thought in people's mind, and you're ruining our influence.
Right.
Yeah. So this didn't happen as a result of one day of slaughter. What's happened here is counterintuitive, that the Hamas rampage of October 7th would have unleashed this public anti-Semitism on October 8th and beyond. Couldn't have happened that fast, and it doesn't make sense that it did. A trigger was pulled, or a switch was, a switch was hit that activated this ideological assault on Jews in the United States that had been bubbling and slowly making its way through the institutions for at least 20 years, if not longer.
John, can I take a
please.
minute here and blame the Jews? Is that okay to do?
Well, we're going to get, but we should then mention, if you're going to start blaming the Jews, which
I'm
is
afraid
perfectly
I'm
fine. You want to blame the victim. That's fine. But of course, the people you're going to blame aren't the victim yet. But you also have a piece in the May issue of Commentary that in the same package with Sess about Jonathan Glazer, we call it Jonathan Glazer, liberal Jewish prophet. Jonathan Glazer, the writer-director of The Zone of Interest, who made the remarkable appearance at the Oscars to accept the Best International Feature Award, and announced that the occupation and the behavior of Jews in Israel essentially would lead him, or is leading him and his two co-producers to refute their Jewishness. And we've, of course, been talking about what the hell he was talking about. You celebrate Jonathan Glazer as the prophet of liberal American Judaism. Please ventilate upon this.
Look, so here he stands, this highly educated man who just won a movie, an Oscar rather, mind you, for writing and directing the best foreign film. And he says, right now, we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation, blah, 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 leaving a lot of people to answer, to ask, hold on, do you mean you refute your Jewishness, or do you refute the fact that your Jewishness is being hijacked by politics? And the muddled mindedness and the mush-mouthedness of it all is not a bug, it's the feature. Because once you start kind of analyzing what Jonathan Glazer and his ilk believe, you reach a host of absolute, escalatingly insane basic foundational beliefs about the world, like the fact, for example, that the disparate chamulas or tribes that occupy the towns and villages of Judea and Samaria are secretly really all kind of infused with a deep, profound, invisible, but totally there, trust us, sense of nationhood, because these are the Palestinian people. What these people want very much, in fact, more than anything else, don't pay any attention to the fact that they've refused every offer made to them for 30 years. But what they want is a nation state that mirrors Israel. And the only thing standing between us and this heaven and earth are a few very bad people like Bibi Netanyahu and Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. That point of view is shared by so many Jews. And I wouldn't even at this point call them liberal Jews. I would call them kind of like, this is mainstream American Jewish way of thinking. If you say, hey, there's no such thing as Palestinian people, still to this day, people say, oh my God, that is such an offensive, racist, and historically ignorant position. As long as you believe this fairy tale that, for example, completely disregards facts like the fact that the quote unquote occupation happened in 1967, 3 years after an Egyptian con man named Yasser Arafat invented the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause as a fundraising operation to kill more Jews. If you believe all this set of values, you have already kind of telegraphed to the world that you're willing to accept whatever crazy terms they send your way. There's no real difference between, hey, you must make peace with Hamas, to, hey, Israel is illegitimate and an occupier, colonialist, Nazi state. It's just a matter of gradations. The thing that you should say is a very simple four-letter word, followed by the word you, and that is a serious measure of actual Jewish pride and actual Jewish self-respect. If we had a lot of that, coupled also with some Jewish education, I think we would fare much better. But at what point are we to get any standing if what we believe is the Jonathan Glazer worldview?
So Jonathan Glazer proposes an idea that Judaism, or being a member of the Jewish tribe, is conditional, and that is the ultimate issue of the divide between liberalism and Judaism, and the problem that is faced by Jews who in America are overwhelmingly liberal. Liberalism is internationalist, universalist, and Judaism is particularist. Judaism is about being part of a tribe, a small group of people to whom you owe loyalty the way you owe loyalty to your family or to your parents or something like that. And liberal Jews are incredibly uncomfortable with this demand because they wish to apply universalist principles to everything, or so they say. And so the idea is, well, I've got to judge Israel by the same standards I would judge anything. And therefore, when I am, and by the way, by those standards, Israel should pass any test. It's like the casualty test of this war, where it turns out that Israel is creating fewer casualties amongst its enemy civilian population than any army before it, fighting in urban circumstances. Whatever. They would still pass it, but the idea is, I've got to condition my Judaism on how it passes my liberal smell test. And that is why I think, that's why you say basically this is where liberal American, where Judaism is going to, in the United States, is going to fold up, shrivel up, and die, because it's like conditional love. Conditional love is not love, really. I mean,
and not just Israel, but for the thing that I love about Liel's piece, it's a brilliant piece, and the thing that I like about Liel's writing in the piece and in general is that he sort of has this, Liel, you have this impatience with the idea that there's such a thing as, just being Jewish or only being Jewish, as if it's like a deficiency. You have to, that liberal American Jews believes you have to instrumentalize your Judaism for some good purpose, that right. It's not enough. It's not okay just to be Jewish. You have, if you're still Jewish in this modern day and age, you better use it for a good cause or something like that. And, Liel, you're always writing about how, yeah, no, it's good to be Jewish. I like being Jewish. Being Jewish is good. You don't have to apologize for it, but you also see the contrast, right? Nobody else behaves this way. You don't see Muslim Americans saying, well, my religion is old, so instead of, fasting for the month of Ramadan or whatever, I'm going to volunteer outside an abortion clinic. Right. But you have these. I mean, there was literally, I remember there was this op-ed in the Forward years ago where this girl was like, my expression of my Judaism is on Saturday, instead of going to synagogue on Saturday, I go to an abortion clinic and volunteer. It's like Jews have this way of just saying this old belief has to be used somehow. Otherwise, it's a force for bad or something like that. And you're not sort of allowed to just still be Jewish in this day and age, in this economy. Can you imagine Jews still just being Jewish? And your
And this
whole
is what
point is that, just stop running from
that's right.
who you are. Okay, you're the only guys apologizing for this, and it looks ridiculous.
And this is the Jonathan Glazer, I think, moment, because Seth, he basically was saying there in front of Lord knows how many millions of people, precisely what you said. Our Judaism only has value to us if it could be the handmaiden of a host of other liberal values that are increasingly antithetical and hostile to it. There's an amazing book that I mentioned in the piece, written in the 50s, called When Prophecy Fails. It's a bunch of psychologists. They were tracking this lunatic cult that believed that the world would end on December 21st, 1954. So they show up on December 22nd. The world is still here. The flood did not occur. And they were very curious what would happen to the lunatics when everything that they believed is visibly, demonstrably, absolutely insanely wrong. And here's the amazing and totally unsurprising thing. They tripled down on their lunacy. It's like, no, you don't understand. We have to be more open to Hamas. We have to be more embracing of very painful territorial concessions. We have to be more willing to strip ourselves of pride, joy, education, identity, Judaism, everything that there stands. That is so incredibly cult-like. And so incredibly kind of difficult to understand. And this is why I really loved seeing this man kind of like trip over his tongue, because it gave you a very clear view of the choice. And look, I try to be very wary of binaries. I really believe that only machines, small children, and zealots usually think in binaries. But right now, you have a pretty great example. You either believe in this Jonathan Glazer nonsense, which leads to things that we have seen very clearly on October 7th, or you could stand up, and this is the blaming the victim part of it. You could stand up and be like, you know what? No, I'm not going to stand up for any of this nonsense. I'm going to do what we're allowing every other member of American society to do and be proud and not want to have conversations or task forces, but rather demand forcefully, if need be, that I am protected and respected.
So these two pieces, Seth's your piece and Liel's your piece, add up to this question of response. And so how are we to respond as Jews to this effort to drive us underground? That's Seth's piece. And how are we as Jews to respond to the idea that a good Enlightenment liberal Jew who believes in good things and wants only good things may be contributing to the success and the centrality of people, institutions, and causes that are now actively doing harm to Jewish people?
Can I take a brief
step? Yeah, go ahead.
Before kind of vacating the stage to the other much more smart people than me on this conversation. There's a video. I'll only tell this brief story because it's one of the greatest videos that I've seen in recent memory. It was taken, I think, a week or two after October 7th. And it's a security camera video, but it's pretty good. You could see facial expressions really clearly. It was taken in Brighton Beach. And you see a young, I think, 30-something-year-old man walking through the neighborhood and tearing down hostage posters with this kind of like swagger and bravado. And then you see like a Jewish man in his late 60s or early 70s. And the camera captures his expression perfectly. His expression says something like, now look what you did. I just wanted to go to the store. I had no business with you. And you walked into this neighborhood. And you did this thing, and now you left me no choice but to do what every normal person must do in this situation. At which point, of course, the elderly Jewish man grabs the young terrorist sympathizer and beats him to a bloody pulp. And it should come as no surprise that Brighton Beach suffered very, 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 very few instances of outright Hamas supporting and Jew hatred thereafter. The fact that as a community, we haven't yet come to the point in which we realize that if someone marches in the street saying we're going to kill you, we have not just the right, but the obligation to say, you know what, buddy, I don't think we're going to let that happen here. But rather, let's write an op-ed or convene a congressional hearing. That's kind of strange to me.
Okay, let's broaden that out to the world then and to geopolitics, because of course we are facing this knife's edge both in relation to Israel's putative potential invasion of Rafah and Israel's response to the Iranian, the 300 missiles and drones fired from Iran last weekend. In yet another example of blaming the victim, not Liel's blaming the victim, but rather actual blaming the victim. There is a story this morning in the New York Times, in part by Ronan Bergman, who is, highly sourced in the intelligence community, blaming Israel for what happened with Iran. Because you see, when Israel struck the IGRC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps headquarters in Damascus, not an embassy, a building housing the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps' foreign affairs mission to control and guide the terrorist groups of Hamas and Hezbollah in, outside their borders. Israel decided to strike back, on this strike. And, it didn't tell America until a few minutes before it did it. And if it had only told America, America would have said, don't do it. And Israel, according to this article, or let's say one person in Israel told Ronan Bergman, we miscalculated. We did not expect Iran's response to be as big as it was. Therefore, Israel's at fault, you see, because they struck this and they didn't properly calculate that Iran's strike was going to be massive. And therefore, if they strike back, they started it. Israel started it. America would have told them not to do it, that it was too risky. Then Iran struck back. Now what are you going to do? Take the win. It's all part of this take the win thing. And similarly with Rafah, it's like, why are you going to go into Rafah? What? You're just going to kill a lot of people, and then we're just going to have to not like you anymore. And I'm struck by the duality here, because it doesn't matter what happens. When Israel acts not only in its own defense, but acts preemptively, taking out the commander in Iran who is guiding Hamas and Hezbollah in its daily strategies, therefore is a combatant in the war with Hamas, is a direct combatant. It's like saying, if you kill a general, if you killed McClellan during the Civil War, he wasn't a combatant. You're to blame. You did it. You're to blame. And every time Israel's done this in its history, America and the West have turned on it. Not permanently, obviously. Let's go through every time. 56, right? Didn't happen in 67 because the war was too fast. Although you could say that America turned on Israel before the war because it didn't do anything to stop Egypt from closing the straits and trying to blockade Israel's, southern ports. 73, 82, 99, 2011, 2014, 2021. Every single time Israel has fought back or done what it thought was necessary to quash or kill, an aggressor, we give it a little time, and then we turn on it. And so, and of course, my favorite, which I mentioned earlier in the week, the blowing up of the Osirak nuclear reactor in 1981, which led to an American vote to condemn Israel in the Security Council. I think people, think like it's such a huge thing that, Obama abstained and Biden abstained in these Security Council votes in 2016 and just a couple of weeks ago. But Reagan actually had Jeane Kirkpatrick vote to condemn Israel for destroying Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor. That is how traditional it is for friendly America in the West to view its relation to Israel conditionally when Israel defends itself, which says to me, again, Israel has to do whatever it has to do, and it cannot restrain itself based on the fear of the American reaction, because the American reaction will be bad and will survive. It'll you know what, if it works, if they take out Hamas and destroy Hamas, America will be stronger, and 10 years from now everybody will say that was great that they took out Hamas. Just like in 2014, if Bibi had decided to destroy Hamas in 2014, at the outset of the first Gaza, John Kerry would have been insane and crazy, and Barack Obama would have been insane and crazy, and now we would have been like, boy, that was good. They destroyed Hamas, and now they have a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia.
Right. I mean, this is the concept that Israel is the Jew of the world, right? That they've been replaced with, but this idea was always that the Jew is whose Jew is this? Somebody come get your Jew, right? There was always somebody was in charge, somebody was responsible for the Jew. The Jew didn't have the ability, like everybody else in the world, to make decisions on his own. It was, somebody who let the Jews out was always like the attitude. And the thing that always struck me about when you read about some of the lowest moments in modern history for Jews, the Kishinev pogrom. When you read about the Kishinev pogrom, the thing that struck me is that the authorities at first argued when there was global outrage, because this was the first pogrom that caused global outrage, real global outrage. The authorities argued in Russia that it wouldn't have been so bad if the Jews didn't fight back. Right? Essentially, our guys showed up to try to intimidate them, and a bunch of Jews showed up with clubs and bats and stuff, and then it turned into a whole thing. And it was like, if they didn't stop us from trying to murder them, it wouldn't have gotten out of hand. It only got violent.
Right. There's a very good analogy to this Ronan Bergman piece. Ronan Bergman is this war. What Israel was saying with that strike is that fundamentally, this is a war with Iran. We've been playing it as a shadow war with Iran, but we know it's a war with Iran. Hamas is an Iran Catamite. Hezbollah is an Iran Catamite. Iran is guiding them, paying for them, providing them with munitions, providing them with arms, telling them what to do. And as this goes on, we can't let this stand. And we need to interfere with the operational control of Iran over Hamas and Hezbollah. One good way to do that is to kill the generals. We kill the generals in Syria. We're not attacking Iran proper. We're killing a general in Syria who shouldn't be in Syria anyway doing this. So then they do this. This is what is called a direct, measured, and highly proportional attack. Going after command, control, and communications is what you do in war. So this was control, Iranian control. So you hit the control. Then Iran says, no, we're going to try to do, if we can get them through, maybe we won't be able to get them through. Maybe we'll blow up half of Tel Aviv. I don't know. Maybe it probably won't happen. But you know what? It's worth it to see. Maybe we'll hit the Dome of the Rock. That would be terrible. But it's worth it to give it a shot to see how many Jews, and including, by the way, Palestinians too, we can kill. And then the Jews, according to Ronan Bergman and the New York Times today, are to blame for doing something that everybody does in war, which is go after command, control, and communications. It's astonishing. So I don't know. Israel cannot win this struggle, so it's going to have to do what it has to do.
I think it could win very easily, John.
It can't win the rhetorical battle. I mean, not that it can't win against Iran
but that's
Hamas.
Exactly why it shouldn't play. Look, I'm only a lieutenant in the Israeli army, so very, very low level everything here. But I think it'd be really, really good if at some point this weekend after Shabbos, the entire nation of Israel got together and watched The Godfather. because it is honestly and sincerely at this point the greatest geopolitical guide to this. Imagine a world in which the response on October 7th at around 2 p.m. was striking the Iranian oil fields. Not Gaza, not all this rigmarole, which you already know is getting you where you've ended up, but actually struck the cause for this and expedited the conflict that we all know is coming, and also showed the United States in particular, but anyone else paying attention, including the Saudis, that this kind of axis of resistance nonsense is just not going to stand, and there's a new world order, because that's what men do. I wonder where we would be right now if that was the decision.
Well, remember that leading American, hawk Zionist, my friend, the playwright David Mamet, sort of like in a post-Godfather script for The Untouchables, right, has Sean Connery say, he sends one of your guys to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue.
Two of his to the morgue. Two of his to the morgue. That's the Chicago way. Well, that is the Middle Eastern way. Yep. And so that's what you're saying. I'm saying that there's no percentage in trying to figure out how to limit the crisis between Israel and the United States. There's no way to game it out. So they cannot. And by the way, once again, we learn again that the hawks here after the Iranian attack, Bibi's not the hawk. Horrible Bibi. Bibi must go, says Chuck Schumer. Bibi's a monster, we hear leaked from the White House. Bibi is trying desperately to figure out how to brown nose the Biden administration. It's Gallant and Gantz and Eisenkot who want to go hard, both in Rafah and at Iran. And Bibi's trying to find is trying to snake his way out of this. And yet, so another reason why they should just go for it, because they'll say whatever they have to say. Bibi's the dove in that. Bibi's the semi-dove in that triumvirate that is the war cabinet, not the evil monster.
The beloved Golda Meir of the left's beloved Golda Meir, was like, well, if this war continues to take this turn, I'm going to nuke them. And, Kissinger and Nixon were like, all right, well, let's make sure that doesn't happen. That's Golda Meir. Bibi's not calling Biden and saying, I'm going to nuke Iran if this doesn't stop. I mean, there's a certain by the way, that's another argument for in favor of what you're saying, which is that the historical memory, Golda Meir will always be remembered as this great liberal Jewish hero, despite the fact that her response was, I'm going to knock your head off your neck. Because when she
was girl power.
Let me tell you, in Tel Aviv, right near where Liel is Anu, which is the museum of was the diaspora museum, and it's now, I don't know what, it's the museum of the Jewish experience or the Jewish people. And there's a fantastic gift shop. And you know what they sell there? Golda Meir socks. They sell socks with Golda Meir on them so that Americans can come buy themselves some socks. She's like the Ruth Bader Ginsburg of a previous era. They can wear socks with Golda Meir's face on them. I bought some for my kids. They're really cute and it's really adorable. And she said stuff about the Palestinians and about the Arabs and about nukes that if you duplicated them today, she would be considered to the right of Smotrich and Ben-Gvir.
I just want to say,
they hate their children. I mean, she said stuff like we love our children and they hate our big liberal socialists, Golda Meir,
the Elise Stefanik of liberal Zionism.
Exactly.
In talking about sort of Israel playing the game of American opinion and Western opinion, there's actually an aspect of this that, for once, I think doesn't have entirely to do with the fact that the party involved is Israel and Jewish, which is that in America, when there's a conflict between good and the bad, The longer the conflict goes, the more American opinion slides toward the bad guy. This has happened. We see it happening in Ukraine, right? Sympathy for the Ukrainians has fallen. It happened during the Bush years, during the war on terror in Iraq. So that's the sickness that of the American traditional Western position. There is no reason for Israel to have to adapt itself to that. That should be walled off from any decision they make.
Yeah, it's the world is soap opera, right? If you ever watched daytime soap operas, the classic thing about the daytime soap opera is the longer you watch it, the hero becomes a villain, the villain becomes... People get bored with the storyline. The storyline has to shift. So if you're supporting Israel for a couple of months, and then someone says, the story is more complicated. Here's Act Two. Act Two, Israel kind of responsible for what happened. Hamas may have had some reason. People go, really? That's interesting. I guess I'm kind of bored with the storyline I had, which is that the Hamas were bad guys who killed 1,200 people and wounded 3,500. You know what? I've shoved that into my back pocket. Give me something new. Right. And Israel, that's why like trying to govern and be moderate in your aggressive approach here is self-defeating. And I want to ask you, Liel, just to go, because I'm still reeling from this poll the other day released by Hebrew University that says that 74% of Israelis oppose a strike on Iran if it harms Israel's relationships with its allies. Given the fact that you are now the spokesman of all 9 million people in Israel since you're there, and know what everyone is thinking, does this number make any sense to you? Or is it, if you clipped it off and you didn't say if it harms our allies, and you just said, do you support a strike on a retaliatory strike on Iran? What is Israeli public opinion? Where is it going? Is that why things seem to be slowing down in relation to the Iran strike?
I think it's a really crucial and foundational questions, because I think one of the more difficult things that Israeli society has to do in the aftermath of October 7th is not only recalibrate its thinking, the conceptia, as we call it, the sort of strategic worldview regarding the Palestinians, but much more troublingly, Israelis have to update their conceptia about the Americans. Israelis have for very long been very, very, very enthusiastic supporters of the United States of America, a nation that they perceive as having an almost mystical bond with Israel. Early on in this conflict, they, for reasons that we could discuss at length, but perceived Joe Biden as really uniquely, kind of like almost like a savior-like figure, uniquely involved and attuned. The notion that Israel may very soon have to make strategic decisions that are crucial to its well-being, that will put it in opposition to a Democrat Party that increasingly is making it very, very clear that their sort of regional realignment strategy or policy actually necessitates turning Israel into kind of like a no longer sovereign state, but kind of like a vassal of the United States of America, is something that Israelis are grappling with. I don't think if you just said, should we strike Iran, Israelis would say, oh, yes. I think actually Israelis are no longer capable of thinking about these military decisions outside of the context or the way of thinking about it that is very, very America-centric. And look, this all comes down, and I've written this, it was not one of my more popular pieces, but I stand by it. It all comes down to American aid to Israel. American aid to Israel, which is basically a kind of backdoor subsidy to American defense contractors, is perceived by Israelis far and wide as the kind of sine qua non without which Israel could simply no longer exist. And once you actually explain to Israelis, and this view is held, including by senior IDF officials, once you explain to them that actually no, once you take away this crutch, Israel could actually manufacture much better weapons and be significantly freer to pursue its own strategic goals, including some pretty existential ones, they stand scratching their heads because they simply cannot think their way into a, shall we call it, post-American reality. I understand that. That is emotionally, philosophically very, very difficult, and part of the growing up process that is happening right now.
I just want to say, by the way, can I just add to before we get too far away from the socks thing, that there's a guy named David Matlow in, I believe, Toronto, who runs an organization called the Herzl Project, and he once sent me socks that have Theodore Herzl playing hockey. So if you want great Jewish socks, Golda Meir from the museum that John was talking about,
and
or Herzl
David
playing
Matlow's
hockey.
Herzl playing hockey, right? Well, the late Joe Lieberman used to say that that the American aid to Israel wasn't just about Israel's needs, but about America's needs, and it's an interesting point that. Though I understand and I've understood for years the idea. Milton Friedman was one of the first expostulators of this, that Israel was curtailing itself by allowing itself to live as when it had a much smaller economy. Very important to note here that when the aid started from the United States, because Israel gave up the oil fields in the Sinai during the Camp David Accords, that was when the aid from America started. Aid, by the way, that it remains and remains larger to Egypt than to Israel, or was at least for a long time. Egypt got $4 billion, Israel got $3 billion. Egypt, of course, a much larger country. Nonetheless, when Israel had an economy that was about a tenth of the size that it is now, that $3 billion was very meaningful. Israel now has a $535 billion economy, or maybe it's even larger than that, for 9 million people. And could it afford to lose the $3 billion in aid? Sure, of course it could. What is that money being spent on? It's being spent on Haredi schools. That's nice, but you could take it away from the Haredi schools if you need it for bullets. I know Liel has a whole thing about how he wouldn't want to do that, but now we're getting in the weeds. I'm just saying,
no, but
could you do it?
Because the Israeli National Security Institute calculated the numbers that Israel is losing because of this aid package. They came up with the conclusion that Israel was losing about $1.2 billion and about 20 to 60, possibly even 80,000 jobs every year, just as a result
because it does not have a domestic munitions economy.
By Barack Obama's so-called most generous aid package ever that took away all of its ability to manufacture its own munitions, while at the same time made it very susceptible to accusations of well, why should we give $3 billion to a country that's murdering and starving innocent civilians in Gaza? It was a poison apple. It was built to do precisely what it's doing right now. Let's say, you know what? We're a sovereign nation. No, thank you. Baruch Hashem, we can take care of ourselves. And we love you. If we share common interests, we would love nothing more than to take you out for a nice steak dinner. But until then, we're going to bomb the oil fields of Iran.
By the way, bombing the oil fields of Iran raises an interesting 2024 question. Because, of course, one thing we know, in one of the more outrageous things that happened earlier this year, is that Vice President Kamala Harris, told the Ukrainians that America did not want them to do anything to interfere with Russian oil production. One of the few successes that the Ukrainians have been having this year is in striking at Russian infrastructure, because the conflict on the battlefield is frozen. They reacted with kind of outrage and surprise because they thought America was on their side, but America's not on their side that much if you are the Biden administration and you don't want gas prices to go up in the summer. And therefore, the provocation that would be represented by an Israeli strike on the Iranian oil fields and the effect that might have on gas prices, Biden really might suggest, as he did yesterday, that Israel strike Haifa. or shouldn't strike Haifa. I don't know if you guys saw this. Biden said, I know, baby. I said, don't hit Haifa. Just in case you're wondering how he's doing, the President of the United States, not good, Bob.
Haifa is beautiful. I agree wholeheartedly. Don't strike Haifa. I agree with the president.
It's a bunch of commies. I don't know. I got my own problems with Haifa, as Liel does too, I'm sure. But listen, that would be like, striking Berkeley. So if you struck Berkeley, that would be a terrible thing, kinda. Anyway, don't worry. Israel's not going to strike Haifa, but apparently Kamala Harris would probably prefer Israel strike Haifa than it strike the Iranian oil fields, given the possibility of an effect on oil prices, damaging Joe Biden's re-election prospects. Anyway, all right. So we have solved nothing here. We solved absolutely nothing. And Liel, I wish you a Zis Pesach. I hope everyone does watch The Godfather before the beginning of the Paschal feast on Sunday night. We will, of course, be back tomorrow. We will not be podcasting Monday and Tuesday because those are... Excuse me, we'll be podcasting on Monday. We will not be podcasting Tuesday and Wednesday because of the Passover holiday. So have a Zis Pesach, I'm saying to you here. We will be back to not have one tomorrow yet. So for Abe and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.